Hello, welcome to Holding Ground, a show that tackles topics in mental health and psychotherapy for individuals, couples, children, and families. Our goal is to promote well-being by normalizing mental health challenges. I'm your host, Laura Richer, a psychotherapist and the founder of Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. For more tips and resources on mental health, visit anchorlighttherapy.com or follow us on socials at Anchor Light Therapy.
Welcome back to Holding Ground. This is your trusted resource for psychotherapy and mental health insights. I am Ashlyn Graff, and I'm joined today by our clinician, Sarah Stewart. And in today's episode, we are going to be diving into navigating your 20s and how therapy might help. So I'll have you kind of start. What do you think really characterizes young adulthood?
Young adulthood can be characterized by really life transitions primarily, and so it's also the intersection of life transitions, multiple happening all at the same time. So that might mean going from living with family to living alone or living with roommates. That might mean going from a school environment to a work environment, from being in your family of origin to then building your own family, whatever that might look like. It's also the first time where there aren't set benchmarks in the way that sometimes in the progression of school we progress as a collective. This is the first time where there is a blank slate and people progress differently in different avenues of their life, and it can be a little more difficult to understand, kind of get your bearings in what feels like it's being fulfilling to you, and how to know if you're doing quote unquote well or getting to where you want to be.
Yeah.
It's also a time where goals and values and messaging can feel contradictory. So young adults receive messaging that tells them to be selfish and indulge in their interests and explore their interests, and in a way that they might not be able to later in life. And then they're also receiving messaging telling them to get ahead and to build this foundation and for their future. And so that can feel contradictory and cause a lot of confusion.
Yeah. That does sound like a lot going on at once. Yeah, you made me think a lot about just like how much people tend to like change when we're talking about it in therapy, which is not that much.
Not too much.
Yeah, I think it's also like you're really navigating a lot of those life challenges for like the very first time. So you don't have a basis for like, how do I do certain things, or how do I do all of these things that are now on the list of responsibilities. So like some people don't learn self-care from maybe their parents, or they don't learn how to like do their taxes or clean their house properly. Some things just really slip through the cracks, and so people are kind of like comparing themselves to others in terms of like, this is where I should be, or this is what I should be doing at this point in life, when we all have just very different learning experiences in family of origin. So I feel like that's a piece of it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why do you think that like conversations about mental health are really important in the context of your 20s?
The 20s is an especially important time to be introspective and take a look and be supportive of your mental health, in that a lot of mental illness comes on during your 20s, and it can be particularly challenging for a number of reasons. The American Psychiatric Association estimates that 3/4 of mental illness is onset by the age of 24. So it's a time when you're processing your past, maybe, you're grappling with the stressors in the present, and also planning for a future. And that can bring up a lot.
Yeah.
Also, if individuals are able to have a positive experience seeking mental health care, or just familiarize themselves with what mental health support might look like, what it might feel like, and what works for them in their 20s, that also sets them up for interacting with the mental health care system and mental health support in their future, as again other stressors come about later on. It's also the first time that they're experiencing a lot of new emotional experiences. Yeah. So with those transition comes a lot of new feelings, new types of relationships, new responsibilities, again, new stressors. And so navigating that can feel overwhelming. And so since a lot of that comes on during your 20s, it's an especially important time to check in with yourself and take care of your mental health.
Yeah, like breakups, big moves, like just going through these things that you've never been through before as an adult it's so hard.
Yeah, it's different. It can feel scary. And then also grappling with what the expectations are in this phase of life as well. So expectations societally, maybe it's from your family, maybe it's from your culture, and how that might look different than the person next to you or the peers that you're used to, checking in with yourself to see, am I meeting those expectations? Who is setting those expectations?
Yeah.
Is it you? Is it somebody outside?
Yeah. Or are there even expectations? And if there aren't, then what in the world am I doing? Yeah, I feel like that lack of guidance is challenging too. I mean, with that, I think like with college too, the first time you live on your own and like maybe it's not what you expected. I feel like I have a lot of clients who will come and kind of talk about like they thought that they'd get this experience where they'd make all these friends and they'd do well in school, and it didn't turn out like that, and it's like the first like big disappointment. And so like I think that can be really hard if the expectations that maybe they set are not the same as what they experience. I know you already said the processing childhood trauma when you're finally out of the house, but like that is so big because like with trauma, we don't really process it while we're in it. We're literally just trying to survive whatever's going on. So if there is abuse in the home, or if there's a lot of fighting or tension, a lot of the time those kids are just trying to get through it. And then when they leave, they're like, oh my gosh, that was not good or not right. And that can lead to like the onset of mental health symptoms for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot to process and grapple with in a new environment when trying to navigate that. A lot of individuals with traumatic upbringings or adverse experiences also seek that, or that's a fantasy that helps as a coping mechanism during trauma to think about that time when you'll be out of the house, and then for that to then interact with the reality of what that might look like, what it does feel like to live on your own, or to not have that company of family, regardless of how difficult it may have been, is something is a transition to grapple with as well.
Totally. We're also in this like very new era that a lot of people are navigating of technology and social media. So like people in their 20s now have so much access to comparison all the time that like they didn't really used to have. And so I think when they're setting these expectations, that has a huge impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, there in the school system, you have a set plan to progress through each grade, and when the school system tends to end for most individuals and it feels like a blank slate, the possibilities are endless, which can feel exciting, but also the possibilities are endless, and that can feel really overwhelming. And so without that benchmark or that set criteria set by the school system to evaluate progression and what to do next, a lot of individuals will look to their peers to see and evaluate themselves through comparison to see, how am I doing? What do they have that I don't have? Where do I want to go? But this person's already gotten there, and it can really stir up some deep some self-talk and some challenges in the realm of comparison.
Yeah, it's amazing the two connotations of that sentence of like the possibilities are endless and oh gosh, the possibilities are endless. Like I really heard that. What are some common challenges that young adults tend to like want to work on in therapy?
A lot of the work done in therapy with young adults tends to center around navigating sense of self and identity, and really strengthening a sense of self-trust. So getting familiar with and strengthening that inner voice that does know to become in tune with what it is that you want, what do you like, what do you not like. It's a time when a lot of questions come up for young adults around who am I, what is my purpose, what actually feels good for me, and what might feel good because it's societally appropriate or approved. And so there's a lot of introspection that can happen there in order to better understand ourselves and then empower from within.
Absolutely. I think empowerment's a really good word for that too, because so many people are moving from this place of like, I don't know if I can do this or handle all these changes to this place of feeling like, oh, actually I can. So that's really like amazing too.
Absolutely. And another area that I tend to work with young adults is around boundaries and what that looks like. And I know boundaries can be a buzzword there, but a lot of as I mentioned, with the expectations, in order to satisfy societal expectations, familial expectations, maybe career expectations, whatever that might be, a lot of people pleasing can happen, and that can look like sacrificing boundaries or more porous boundaries, and understanding what role boundaries play in creating that identity and reinforcing what it is that feels, creating an environment that feels good and supportive for the individual. And sometimes that does look like boundaries, so that tends to come up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also like a lot of navigating like love and relationships in this time. So finding and creating healthy adult attachments and learning like what in my past maybe was unhealthy and what do I want relationships to look like as I continue. We can either change or kind of like perpetuate attachment patterns that maybe were not so healthy. So I see a lot of work around, how do I stop avoiding or stop being so attached to people that it's like actually distressing. And I think that there is a lot of great work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a time where relationships are at the forefront, and that can be attachment with our attachment figures, our caregivers growing up, our family, as we then start to relate to romantic partners and create attachment figures in them, but also with friendships and career relationships. And there's a lot of evolution as people go on their different paths, and as you learn and grow and change, how does that also change you in relation to others?
Absolutely. Another thing I think that we see a lot is like decision making and exploring how to make decisions. So again, kind of navigating that self-doubt or anxiety or fear of like risk causing avoidance. Like some people kind of get stuck and don't take risks or make these big moves. And so we don't want people staying paralyzed in the sense. So exploring like, well, what could those options mean for you? What might that look like? And I think I see a lot of anxiety that people are going to choose the wrong choice or the wrong thing. And so sometimes it can be reiterating like there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. Sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't. And that's a big part of like life and existing.
And who is deciding right and wrong?
Yeah.
Is that coming from an external source? Is that coming from within? So some of the work that I'll do with young adults is around building and understanding values. Mm-hmm. And how can values and a strong value system help to better understand your identity, create your identity, and also help with that decision making. How to trust your gut and trust yourself, to know that there's that saying about not making a wrong decision, making a decision wrong. And then vice versa. So if you're making your decision in line with your values, trusting that was the right move for you, and being able to ease some of that concern or anxiety, as long as it's in line with the values that you have for yourself.
I really like that, because sometimes we hear people saying even when things don't work out, like I wouldn't change anything. And I feel like that's when you know you've reached the point of empowerment. Well, what do you think is like normal for a 20-year-old to be experiencing versus like what warrants additional support, either through therapy or other kind of resources? Like when would you say is an important time for folks to seek therapy at this age?
That's a great question, because it can be hard to tell.
Yeah.
Your 20s come with a certain amount of nervousness, anxiety. There's a lot of uncertainty that can happen, and so that's natural to feel curious, to feel nervous, and not sure what your next step is, to as you embark on new adventures, as you take on new challenges, to wonder to yourself, am I prepared? What's that going to be like? What am I going to be like in that scenario? And to have those questions, to be processing these changes. Changes are tough. And then there's a time where the changes and the adjustment might drum up enough anxiety or concern or depressive symptoms where it's starting to interfere with your ability to function and your ability and your relationships.
Yeah.
And those are two of the signs that additional support might be helpful for an individual. I would also say when you let go of your basic needs. So again, getting in the way of daily functioning. So that might be getting in the way of sleep, eating, being able to take care of yourself and your physical needs as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like the quote of like, your response is a normal response to an abnormal situation too, because sometimes people are just in extremely tough life contexts. So like burning out or getting overwhelmed or struggling with like the state of the world, like these are all kind of things that we hear about in your early 20s. And so I think there's a level of like, yes, this is normal, but it doesn't have to affect you so much that you're suffering as much as you are. So yeah, I think really looking at that, like, when does stress affect your ability to function? And like, when do you realize that you're suffering more than you have to be?
Yeah, and you know yourself well, so if you find that something is on your mind a significant amount more than it usually is for you, if there's some change and you're finding it difficult to manage, it's another time where, we don't have to go through this alone. You're definitely not going through it alone. Most others in their 20s are probably experiencing similar stresses. But also, if it feels like too much to manage or you're finding it difficult to cope, it's a great time to maybe take another hand of support.
Yeah. Well, when someone decides that they want to reach out for help using therapy, what kind of like tools or modalities would you use to help adults like navigate this time in their life or these challenges that we've discussed?
First thing that I like to work with young adults on is just kind of to communicate and understand these emotions. So as we've talked about today, these are complicated transitions. There are many transitions happening at once. That also likely means that there are many mixed emotions happening at once. And so just really understanding what those emotions are, naming those, getting familiar with the emotions that are coming up. That can also start to get into the self-introspective work to understand yourself and what types of scenarios maybe trigger or lead to feeling different emotions.
Yeah.
Where does that look? In addition, working on self-talk and something from cognitive behavioral therapy called cognitive restructuring allows us to examine the way that we speak to ourselves. What are those thoughts that feel really negative or limiting beliefs that we might have? How can we understand them and also restructure them to not be as limiting or as harmful to our mental health? What might be something that's a more flexible belief that we can carry forward that will help to support us? And then lastly, a lot about, because this phase is a time where they might be looking forward to the future, it can be about a growth mindset and empowerment and kind of vision setting, understanding, like I said, with the values, what are your values and how can you integrate those into your decision making, into your daily life, and into your relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I use a lot of CBT too with folks that age, so that's great. I think when there's trauma at play from childhood, EMDR can be something that is really helpful as well. So that might be something to look into if you're experiencing that. Well, Sarah, do you want to kind of wrap us up for today's podcast?
I would love to, and thanks so much for the conversation. We hope that this conversation about navigating your 20s was relatable and validating and shed some light on how therapy can be helpful during a difficult time period and transition. For more resources and information from Anchor Light Therapy Collective, visit our website or follow us on social media at Anchor Light Therapy.
Thanks for tuning in to Holding Ground. For more tips and resources on mental health, visit anchorlighttherapy.com or follow us on socials at Anchor Light Therapy. This podcast is for the purpose of education only and is not a replacement for mental health treatment. We suggest you seek out the support of a trained professional for help with your specific situation. Stay tuned for more upcoming episodes.